Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's HDI webinar, Automation and AI in the Workplace, Are Bots the Future? Today's webinar is brought to you by Samanage on the web at samanage.com, and there's a link right in the Attachments tab in your BrightTalk window. HDI is where technical support professionals belong, but you knew that. And remember that we're having our Fusion Conference along with ITSMF USA, October 31st through November 3rd in Orlando, Florida. Register for that. And the hotel deadline is coming right up on the 25th of September. And I can tell you that the hotel, Rose and Shingle Creek, is 100% operational and good after the recent hurricanes. No problems there. So register for Fusion. You can stay in touch with HDI. You can find us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @ThinkHDI. And, of course, for members, we have connect.thinkhdi.com. That's our member discussion and information site. Great place to be. I'm Roy Atkinson, and I'll be your moderator today. And along with me today is Mark Stitt, who's the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Samanage. And let me tell you a little bit about Mark. He has more than 20 years of product marketing and management experience at companies like Dell, Quest Software, Syncom Systems, and Earth Solutions. He has extensive knowledge of systems management, cloud computing, big data analytics, and customer service software. At Samanage, Mark leads product marketing and strategic partnerships, so we're happy to have Mark with us today.
Good to be here, Roy.
Great, thank you. So right off the top, before we get into the topic, we thought we'd ask you a question. And so I'm going to put a vote out to the audience, and it's a really simple one. What brought you to this webinar today? Either you're currently automating processes, or you're a bit concerned about job losses because we keep hearing about that due to automation. You just want to stay current on industry trends. You want to know more about what's available in the marketplace. Which one of those is closest to your particular reason for coming to the webinar today? I'll give you a few more seconds to answer those when we build up some votes. And then I'll close the poll. What got you here? What made you dial in? Okay, let's close up the voting and view the results. Interesting. Okay, 41% are currently automating processes. 0% are a bit concerned about job losses. Keeping current on industry trends, 44% of you, and want to know more about what's available in the market, 14%. So the big two reasons are currently automating processes and want to know more, and keeping current on industry trends. Good for you. And kind of glad to see about you not being concerned about job losses due to automation. And we'll be talking about some stats in that regard as well. Mark, did you want to say anything about the poll results?
Sure, yeah, Roy. I'm not surprised by these findings. I think automation is a great opportunity, and I think the group that talked about wanting to know more opportunities out there and keeping current on trends, I think those two go hand in hand to see what are the near-term opportunities and what might the market hold in the next several years. So makes a lot of sense to me.
Cool. All right. Let's start off with some definitions. Mark, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Roy. So, in this market around bots being the future and thinking about automation, let's start with a few definitions just to ground ourselves in where we are today. You've probably heard about artificial intelligence and have some idea about what it is, but what we're talking about here is a broader concept of machines being able to carry the tasks of what might be individuals today, and in a way that might be considered smart. I'll talk a little bit about some examples a little later, but artificial intelligence is really bringing in the aspect of machines automating some of the things that people would have otherwise been doing. The next definition is machine learning. And you've maybe heard machine learning being synonymous with artificial intelligence. It is in terms of being a current application of AI, in terms of having machines be able to access data automatically and just let them learn and adapt for themselves. A good example of this might be if you ever use Uber and you take trips at a certain time of day, maybe to the airport or a certain time of week, it'll almost project, do you want to go to the airport? And it'll load that into your options right away, assuming that's where you want to go, because the last 2 or 3 Uber rides that you took at that time included that address. So that's just an immediate application of machine learning. And then finally is bots, and it's right here in the title of our webinar today, but bots being the future, this would be a device or a piece of software that can automate and execute commands. It could be a reply in a text, it could be something voice-based, and it's performing all these routine tasks with little to any human intervention. So it's, again, taking the role of an administrator or someone that would be processing a request and interacting. That's the key word here. So between artificial intelligence, machine learning, and bots, I wanted to kind of clear up these definitions for the rest of the discussion so we could have a productive one. But they all work together, we believe, in terms of automating things in the workplace, and we'll spend more time on that. All right? Just
Great.
a few everyday examples. Yeah, you want to speak to this, Roy?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So a few everyday examples. I mentioned Uber, but there's other virtual personal assistants. Some of you have used Siri, others have used Google Assist, or maybe something like Amazon Echo. You say, you know, hey Alexa, I'd like to listen to some music, and it will just automate that for you. Certainly, video game technology has leverages for many years where you're playing against a computer opponent, and they're actually learning about your behaviors and responding in ways to make the game more entertaining or more challenging. We've started to see the introduction of autonomous vehicles. A little bit of a scary concept, but when you start to think about autopilot on airplanes or autonomous trains where they're just kind of executing a route, these things are really palatable. But now you start to see Amazon thinking about shipping and logistics, and even some automakers leverage these kinds of technologies. We can't get away from predictive selling. You know, if you go to Amazon to buy something, it's anticipating that if you want to buy this, you probably want to buy this other item that goes with it. So they're predicting what you want, and they're offering it both for customer service, but also to generate more revenue. Fraud detection, you know, this is great for all of us. You know, unfortunately, if it happens to you to have any kind of fraud on your credit card, to alert you and say, well, if you're in the state of New York, why is there a purchase over in Germany at the exact same time? That might be a little bit odd. Online support is great too. Interacting with all of us if we're struggling with a website or a transaction, a bot coming up saying, could I help you? It seems like you're struggling. Yes, I am, and it's interacting with you. And then finally, news generation. We're seeing a lot of these technologies be deployed to offer up to all of us that if you're following this particular political issue, or as Roy mentioned, the hurricane updates, if you're following it, it's going to update you with other things that you might be interested in because you seem to be a weather buff and are tracking these types of activities. So we're seeing this already. But to Roy's points earlier, what about automation and AI in the workplace, and what do we think is going to happen next? And we're going to explore that. Roy, back over to you to talk about some of your research.
Great. Thanks, Mark. So we did some research earlier this year, and we asked lots of questions about automation and plans for the future and what people are automating, and we'll display some of those to you. So this is confidence. How confident are IT pros in the fact that AI and cognitive systems are going to play a greater role in the next 3 years? And 43% are either very confident or somewhat confident that it is going to play a role. But there's some big slugs here where we see, you know, not very confident or not at all confident. So essentially more than half of the IT pros that responded to our survey said that they're not really confident in AI playing a role. I think they're going to be surprised, and most of them are going to be pleasantly surprised, because this stuff is absolutely coming, and it is going to play a role in the workplace. And we need to start thinking about exactly how we're going to use it and how we're going to address the changes that that's going to bring. And that's a little bit of what we want to talk about today. So how is the C-suite thinking about this? This, Mark, is from your research, so we can both talk about this a little bit. C-suite sees huge potential in automation for a whole bunch of reasons, but only 9% said it's not on their radar. So the top level in your organization has probably been looking at this for a while and is very interested in what the potential is for your organization. And 23%, so almost a quarter, said that they're planning to invest in it. So, Mark, did you want to discuss this a little bit further?
Yeah, sure, Roy. I mean, really for these last two assertions, I'm not surprised by this. It is early, but people are curious, and I think the turnout for this webinar is an illustration of that. Executives and even line of business leaders, they're looking for efficiencies. They're looking to not only just get more output out of their employees, they want to shift them from doing less maintenance and becoming more service providers internally, no matter what it is, right? And so I think that those execs that see the potential and they're thinking about it, and the people that are starting to consider this, they're looking at those examples that I brought up from our consumer lives, and they're saying, well, how do I apply that to my business to become more efficient and increase speed? So I think it's starting, and I think the early adopters are going to have the most advantage, just as we see with some of my examples earlier being market-leading companies and really strategic thinking companies that are successful in the market. So I think this is only going to increase over the next couple of years.
Great, thank you. And in your research, IT pros have a little bit of a different view on it, a little bit more detail on what we're going to do with this and how it's going to affect our workplace. And you can see here a lot of them feel that it's going to make the team more efficient and effective. Very high percentage there. It will free up staff to focus on more strategic work and will eliminate some IT spending. So reduction and eliminating repetitive work is really, really good for those in our audience here in the HDI community at large, because for years we've been struggling to stop firefighting and get on with more project work, more value-added work. And this is one way we can see this happening, is to try to get that repetitive work that can be automated, and it should be automated. Password resets, account creation, lots of those types of repetitive processes. Would you agree with that, Mark?
I would, and it's so ironic you bring up password reset because it's such a great example. We had a customer that did a little bit of an analysis with us, and we started to look at their relatively senior IT staff, their help desk staff. And these are very accomplished people that can do many things around the company, but the percentage of time in a given day or week that they're doing password resets or asking someone to reboot their computer or other kind of repetitive types of things that just frankly happen in every company is a huge percentage of their time. So those of you in leadership, you're saying, out of my staff, how much time are they spending on these things that if they could be automated, this person could have 30% more time to focus on the strategic things like you mentioned, Roy, and not these things that just frankly are going to happen forever because it's the nature of human error and having, computer systems in companies. So that's really where IT's head is today, and it goes back to my point about efficiency.
I agree, and just to put a fine point on it, actually a very blunt point on it, I was talking to someone that I know very well recently who took over a support group in a huge company, very, very, very large company. And they are currently manually resetting. In other words, somebody calls or contacts the service desk and gets their password manually reset 600,000 times a year. 600,000 times. Now, even if you take the average cost per ticket across channels, which in our research from 2016 was $18.50, and cut it in half because those calls are usually fairly short and easy to handle. So cut that in half. and call it $9 a piece, you're talking about almost $6 million worth of work to reset those passwords. It's staggering how efficient this will become when companies do employ more automation. I didn't get into the why that company's doing it that way still, but there you go. It's a good example of how you can reduce cost by automating these processes. So that's the last bullet on that slide.
And there's dozens of those in every company. You're exactly right.
Yep. So, all right, let's move on to what you folks are doing and what you're thinking about as you move forward.
Great. So Samanage, we're the service success company. We focus on smart service management. And so we have about 1,600 customers worldwide, anywhere from small to mid-sized to large companies. And what we believe the future is going to hold is service management that brings in not just automation the way we've done it before, but it leverages the power of artificial intelligence and machine learning and bots for much more successful service outcomes. What we're really focused on is helping you treat your employees like your best customers. We spend a lot of time out there focusing on our end customers, but if our employees could be more productive and efficient and get what they need faster, not just IT, but any other service in the company, we can all be much more successful. So we believe that organizations like yours want to increase intelligence, speed, and connectivity, and can use these technologies to do that. And what that's going to help you do is anticipate things, before they happen. Nobody likes surprises. We want to prevent problems instead of reacting. And then we ultimately want to create differentiated business opportunities. I mentioned some of the illustrations earlier about Amazon or news media or Uber. These are companies that 3 to 5 years ago, these technologies weren't quite there yet, but now imagine our lives without them. We take it for granted just how efficient our experiences are with those companies, sometimes too efficient when they're trying to sell us things, but it's creating a better experience all the while making them more profitable. And those types of benefits can translate to your company as well because of these technologies helping remove the waste that Roy mentioned earlier and improve your speed and efficiency within the company. And that's what Samanage is focused on doing. So the way that we're going to deliver this is with our existing solutions for IT service management and configuration management database, or CMDB, is we are making these much more smarter. So we're saying first, a smart service desk. This is going to help you resolve these simple requests on their own and predict different outcomes based on performance. It's going to be more proactive in helping you identify problems that might affect multiple users versus just the one issue at hand. We're also focused on self-maintaining CMDB. For those of you familiar with CMDBs, they have a little bit of a bad reputation in the market and historically. And that's because they get out of date and they get unreliable. And they lose their ability to help you understand how these business services are running and where there might be problems and potential impact to users. So if it's self-maintaining, we can have visibility into these potential issues before they become a problem, and we can remediate the actions either on our own or automate those actions. I'll have an example a little bit later, but this is really where these technologies like AI and machine learning can dramatically improve how up-to-date these systems are and allow your administrators to focus on the task at hand, not on maintenance of the systems. And then finally, and perhaps most excitingly, is leveraging voice recognition. And this is where we're taking the power of artificial intelligence from a voice perspective. So just like an Amazon Echo or a Google Assist, let's have a virtual assistant to the service desk that your users can just speak to. And I'll use Roy as an example. Roy can mention, I'm having a problem with my password, or I'm having issues connecting to email. Well, the system's going to know who Roy is, where he's located, what kind of email he has, what kind of device he has. So if you think about your service experiences of answering these types of questions over and over again, it's terribly inefficient for you, and somebody's on the other side asking you all these questions. With the power of AI and machine learning, we can automate all that. And Roy can simply say, I'm having problems with my email, please help me resolve it. And through a variety of automations, we can reboot his machine, we can reset his password without any human intervention on the other side. And if that works, then great, everybody's happy. If it's not, now Roy has an escalation path of, that didn't work, I'd like to speak with someone. And if this is happening at 9 o'clock tonight, that's far better for Roy to get it done on his own than waiting to be dispatched someone, from IT. So we really believe the future of ITSM is a smarter service management experience by harnessing the power of AI, machine learning, and bots. Roy, let me hand it back to you to talk a little bit about what departments will benefit and how this may play out.
Sure. Well, you've been hearing more about enterprise service management and what that means. And to simplify it, it's taking the service management processes and principles and, in many cases, the tools that have been used by IT for a substantial amount of time now, and using that same approach for other departments within your organizations. And what we know from our research is about half of you, a little bit more than half of you, are already doing this, and more of you are jumping on every year. HR is a very common way to department that does this most often, followed by finance and operations. And the same type of thing is going on there, where processes that are repetitive, such as application intake and onboarding, those types of operations that can be automated, will be automated and make it much more efficient and effective for people who are dealing with HR. Same thing with finance. There are standard operations that go on in finance, purchase orders that need to get processed, requests for checks to be cut, all the types of things that the finance operations do. Many of those are also repetitive and ripe for automation. And then operations, we can talk about facilities departments. We can talk about a lot of the different departments in whatever your business happens to be. And what you find is that the same types of things exist. And so automation is not only for IT, although IT has begun to automate more than anybody else, but the same types of things can be done across the organization. Mark?
That's right, Roy. What's interesting about this topic is more and more everyone is becoming a service provider, every department across the company, whether we really want to be or not. And it really makes sense when we think about use cases like HR onboarding or a request like a facilities or IT request where a group of us go to a conference room in the building and we find out that the monitor isn't working or the phone isn't working. And it leads us to this confusion of, well, what do I do about this? Do I call IT? Do I call facilities? Do I call operations? Because there's a bit of a gray area of, well, what is the problem? Many of you may have in your own companies multiple types of help desks or approaches. Some are by phone, others email. IT might have a service desk or help desk. But from a user perspective, I'm sitting in the conference room and I really don't know what to do next. I don't know who to turn to. So departments that will benefit really take a holistic look of service management and they say, I want one service experience for the whole company. And then to Roy's comments, it's about getting that automation and those efficiencies within each department and then across the company. So that if someone's struggling in a conference room, a couple of tickets might be dispatched to say these two admins will work together. And so, facilities, why don't you take the first pass here and let me know if there's an IT problem that I need to fix. And then now everybody's operating efficiently versus someone waiting an hour to get any kind of service or sending 4 different people to the conference room. So departments will benefit as they adopt one service management strategy and employ these types of automation techniques that we've talked about today within their own services. Right?
Great. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And before we get on to some more of the HCI research that shows where companies are going, let's find out where you think your company is doing. What are you doing right now in terms of considering what you're going to automate. So I'm going to start a poll. And what is your organization considering automating? Are you going to add process automation through our ITSM tool, as Mark was talking about? Looking into AI to assist support staff, for example, looking up solutions in a knowledge base, maybe that can be automated. What are we going? We are going to be using chatbots or virtual agents. So maybe there'll be a chatbot up front, so people can ask questions. You can do a little bit of triage up front, and no plans at this time, just learning about it. So think about what your company is considering doing in the near future, and I should pick one of those answers, and we'll look at the results in just a minute. Let you have another. Okay, great. I'm going to stop the voting, and let's take a look at the results. So about a third of you adding process automation through ITSM tools. Over 20% looking at AI to assist support staff. Very interesting. There's some interesting stuff going on. Numbers just changed, so it just calculated the last votes. Almost a quarter of you looking into AI to assist. You're going to be using chatbots, about a quarter of you, and no plans at this time, about 20%. So very interesting there that a fairly high percentage of you are going to be using chatbots or virtual agents. And then AI to assist support staff, about a quarter in each one of those cases. And that's substantial, and that's gone up a little bit. You'll see what the overall percentage is in the HDI research when we look at that in a minute. Mark, did you have anything to say about this?
It looks like we have a more progressive group, Roy, than those polled in the HDI research. It looks like there's some thought leaders here and people that are starting to take these steps. I'm not surprised, though, with kind of an equal spread between ITSM tools and AI and chatbots, because I think everyone's trying to employ the best technologies that they can for the use cases that they have. So it's good to see that there's an eager group here to start employing these different techniques to gain the efficiencies or the other benefits that they're looking for. So it looks like a lot of the group here is on their journey.
And I also think that to a certain extent, in the last few months, since the research was done earlier in the year, the interest in AI and automation in general has ramped up substantially, and more tools are becoming available every day. So I'm not surprised to see a little bit of an increase here. But let's look at the numbers that we found across the organizations responded. So they said only about 10%. We're looking at AI. Big data was big. Cloud applications, of course, that's the biggest ones. Service automation, so almost half, a little higher percentage there than we're looking at automation within the ITSM tool, but so service automation covers more than just that. Virtual support agents, substantially more in our little poll today, only about 12.5% there. So you can see the breakdown of how new technologies are coming in and what organizations are considering investing in. There's a large array of tools. But we've also broken it down a little bit further than we were looking at in today's webinar. We talked about cognitive systems, and we talked about machine learning separately, and we talked about some of the AI aspects differently. So you can see what the percentages are. But only, again, a small percentage, less than 9%, have no plans to introduce some of these new or growing technologies into the organization. A surprising number of organizations are still using homegrown applications and considering investing more in those. They may be very organization-specific, proprietary, whatever. But it's a little bit surprising to see that with the availability of applications all across the board, either from the cloud or from out-of-the-box vendors. A lot of employee networking going on, and customer experience is huge, and that is really important going forward. And a lot of this that we're talking about today such as the ability of automation to assist support, will go a long way in improving the customer experience, getting people help faster, as Mark mentioned, and getting them back on track perhaps without even being interrupted at all and having to contact support. Mark, do you want to discuss this a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not surprised by some of the bigger ones like cloud applications and service automation. If those are kind of the basics of gaining a more modern approach to ITSM or automation in general for your company. If you remove those from the chart and you look at the rest of the investment areas, I think that there's a building block approach that getting your data together and understanding your customer experience, all those things are kind of the next set of building blocks. So for some of the more predictive and cognitive type capabilities to be a little bit smaller, I'm not surprised because these things tend to build upon themselves. And the way that Samanage approaches it with our customers is AI and machine learning and even bots are a building block on top of service management. It doesn't replace the need to define processes and offer services from a service catalog and all those best practices of ITSM. Rather, it accelerates what you're already doing or augments it. So I'm not surprised with the investment areas, but I think this chart, for some of the lower ones, sort of sub 10%, these are going to go much faster over the next 3 years, right?
I agree. And also one of the things that we tend to forget when we look at the numbers from one of these surveys is that among the other percents that we don't see are people who have already done this or are doing it. We tend to forget about that. Well, what are you going to do over the next 12 months? Well, we did that last year. So we're not going to say that we're investing in collaboration and employee social networking because we did that last year. So bear that in mind when you look at these numbers, that some of these, especially the less forward-looking ones, the less automated and depending on artificial intelligence and machine learning, are likely to have been done already. But then again, you see the cloud applications, which is, cloud has been around for years and still expanding extremely rapidly, and more, as I mentioned earlier, more applications becoming available all the time, and organizations can take advantage of a lot of things that they would have had to build previously in-house, and now they can just get them from the cloud, as they say, and use them as needed, where needed. All right?
Great.
Over to you, Mark.
All right. Thank you. So let me give you a couple of illustrations relative to service management in your company. We first see a scenario here of a service agent. You could call this a technician or someone operating the service desk. And this is an example that maybe would apply to your company. If we could harness the power of these technologies and build playbooks, right, that would create this autonomous situation, we can move to zero-level support. We can help free up these very talented admins and agents to do other things. So if a printer were to fail, or a password reset, as Roy mentioned, or someone needing access to reporting, we can proactively identify there is a problem, and we can execute commands, as shown in the pink area here, that we go ahead and execute those before people ask the questions. We in IT, in this case, know the printer's down. We are guessing that there will be password problems. So rather than wait for requests, let's push this out and do it automatically before it becomes a problem. If we don't want to go that far, we can back off a step and say, when it comes up, allow the person to click a link and say, I'd like this resolved. And it would run a script in the background. It would, in the case of reporting, confirm that they're allowed to have access, and it would automate the step of granting that permission. Or maybe granting approval of who needs to have that, and then notifying the employee, your manager needs to approve this, you're a new employee, you haven't been in the system yet. So that's the step. So this is just a bit of an illustration to, back to my proactive points, that using these technologies to take away what could be a huge percentage of the time spent, in this case, in an IT service agent context. Let me just speak to a little bit of the benefits here. I think the low-hanging fruit is all about efficiency. I think that either on the parts of service requesters or service agents on the back end, if we can automate these manual and low-value tasks, we can all gain efficiencies and go much, much faster. People requesting services will be able to obtain them in a fraction of the time. They'll be able to resolve them for themselves. And we talked about, in terms of your service agents and your administrators, being able to automate this where they're not even involved, or they're kind of passively monitoring what's happening, but it's not taking a lot of their time. The next one that really can't be overlooked is consistency. In your companies, you probably have processes that are executed differently based on the time of day or the day of the week or who's doing it, right? So what we want to employ is this machine learning aspect of if X, then Y, then Y. So if any of us go to Amazon right now and look at this particular tent that we want to use to go camping, it's going to recommend customers also buy these tent stakes or this lantern, because that's what's happened across dozens, if not hundreds of other buyers. So in that case, Amazon providing a very consistent shopping experience optimized toward, in that case, what they want to sell the customer. We want to create in our companies a consistent experience for those users, no matter what department they're from and no matter what the request. And then finally is intelligence. That's all about predicting the unexpected and preventing the unwanted. I'll give you a good illustration of a customer that we were working with earlier this year. They found that they were getting into a bit of a problem where requests were just growing exponentially within their company. And, you know, they got through it. It was a tough several weeks. And people working overtime, working on the weekends, and they finally got it done. Well, by looking within Semanage after they did the implementation of our tool, they went back and figured out that there's these peak service request times. Maybe it was for a university in this case where they found that it was students coming back to school or students leaving school at the end of the year. These kinds of surges happen with seasonality. It happens with, in this case, universities where there's a lot more users than there typically are. So if we can apply intelligence, we can predict this is going to be a peak time. We need more help. Or this is going to be a time when there's more stress on our systems. We're going to have potential outages if we don't make sure that we understand what's going to happen. So these are just a few of the benefits that we're seeing today in applying automation and artificial intelligence across the workplace in really every department. Roy, back over to you.
Thanks. So here's what we're seeing in terms of workforce consequences. And of course, one of the fears that's been talked about over the last several years is that automation would put a lot of people out of work. Will it eventually? Probably some will move on to other tasks, but that's the key. As you can see, 45% of the organizations that responded to this survey said that headcount reassigned to other tasks was what they're seeing. So people are shifting work. They're not getting fired or laid off. They're taking on other work. Only 8% have reduced the workforce. And more than that, almost 12% have increased the workforce. So in 45% of the organizations, for example, support staff are doing fewer of those repetitive things and shifted to more advanced work. They're doing work on projects. They're configuring things. They're just taking on more complicated tasks. And this goes along with that shift left strategy that we've been talking about for a long time, to let the level 1 and desktop support 1 folks take on more advanced tasks, more complicated work, answer more complicated questions, do more troubleshooting, do more research, more of that advanced type of work that really adds value to the organization, as opposed to just maintaining, turning somebody's machine back on after it's off doesn't really get anybody ahead. It's not value added. And so allowing the work to shift over into a higher value area is a really good way to go, and that's what we're seeing in almost half the organizations. 45% of the organizations that are bringing automation in said we're shifting people to different types of work. Very important stat, I think, and equally important that only a small percentage have reduced the headcount. So that should allay any fears that people have about, losing their work. It's tending not to happen, at least not for a long time. And Mark, did you want to talk about those stats, or did you want to move ahead here?
Yeah, just a quick one, Roy. I talk with a lot of CIOs. It's just a great benefit of the work that I do, and the prevailing comment they make is becoming more of a partner to the business and to their employees. And the more time that their key staff can work with line of business owners or VPs of sales or whatever the case, to say how can IT or how can HR better serve the needs, and start to shape those services and design new things, and move away from those manual and repetitive activities, the better it is. So I think that and we're going to talk about it on the next slide, but there's not a reduction so much as a shift in people becoming more service-oriented toward the business need and the employee needs, and starting to think about things from their perspective, not just the technology perspective of they need this laptop provisioned or they need this password reset. Let me understand their work and what they might be getting into, and how could I improve their experience.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And let's move ahead into jobs of the future. Follows right on to that discussion.
Right. I mean, as we see, these smart technologies are already here. I talked about what's happening in our consumer lives, and we're starting to see this come into enterprises as well. It's already being used in some ways, and I think it's here to stay. I just talked about improving jobs, not really taking them. It's about creating better worker performance. In many cases, this can lead to promotions and expansion of teams, because now these service provider organizations are adding much more value to the business or the employee experience. And then also being more effective, on complex business initiatives. So, this is where we're starting to get into the last mile of being, able to analyze the real impact of these services on the business. So if we're streamlining processes, we can say, let's speed up our hiring plan for salespeople across Europe, because we can now onboard them in a matter of days instead of weeks and make them that much more productive more quickly. So the technology jobs of the future, kind of in summary, are going to take more of this service-oriented nature, where we're applying these technologies to solve bigger problems, not small problems, just like a password reset. That's where I see it going.
Great. Thanks. It is a fascinating area, and it's changing right around us. So let's look at some of the questions now that have come in and take a look at what you're asking about. I'm wondering if we have a good example of a support or service-based AI or bot-based interaction in the consumer space. People continue to use Siri and Alexa as examples, but I'm not sure these are analogous to more complex support interactions. Well, I won't name any names because we're going to try to stay vendor neutral here, but there are companies that are working in this area that have developed things like very intelligent chatbots. You can set it up as your front end for your support and ask a question through a chat window. If it can point you at the immediate document, let's say you need instructions on how to apply for health insurance for your parents. You can get that information immediately. And if, on the other hand, your question is more complex and you need to talk to somebody in HR, it will connect you immediately with somebody in HR via chat. So that's the kind of support that you can get. The interactions are all automated, and it will go as far as it can, triage the question or the issue as far as it can. And as Mark mentioned earlier, you know, like the CMDB, well, maybe this chatbot can find out from the CMDB if there's something showing up that has changed overnight that's not allowing you to log in properly, if there's a domain controller down. One of those issues is happening. And if you need a human intervention, again, as Mark mentioned earlier, it can connect you with somebody at the support center and get that taken care of. Mark, did you have anything to say about that particular question?
I do. I think it's a great question. One thing that we see our customers already doing with InstaManage is using AI that's part of our product to route tickets and service requests. We've all seen this where we're reaching out for help and they don't quite understand what we're talking about. So what we do is an automated categorization to help the user pick between A, B, and C. Is it more like this, or this? And by routing it to the right person, we already gain a lot of efficiencies. In your very company, you may find a certain percentage land in the wrong spot, and then they have to be forwarded over to the next person. And that creates yet another process and potentially delays. So, you know, that's an example of some of the low-hanging fruit that our customers are already diving into.
Great, thanks. Here's a question. For support desk, do you see more value from leveraging the automation capabilities within the tool set, i.e. service desk scripts, as opposed to using third-party AI bot companies to integrate with the platform? Wow. Well, I think the key word in that question is integrate. What you probably don't want to do unless you absolutely have to is introduce yet another tool. Support agents in just about every area, customer service and technical support, have a lot of tools at their disposal and often will have multiple screens open. Having to transfer information from one interface to another interface can usually, you know, that's error prone. It's time consuming. So if you have a tool that has these capabilities integrated right into it, I would think you're going to be better off that way. But there are people also building tools specifically designed to integrate with different systems. So, Mark, maybe you have something to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, Roy. I think it's the question about having more value, you know, within the tool set you have. I think that should be the first step to maximize what your service desk can give you, because that's going to allow you to automate a wide variety of processes, whereas some of the third parties are rather specialized in certain areas. So I think it's a both, but I would start with the service desk and make sure you have a good partner there, and then move on to some of these you know, sort of adjacent technologies.
Here's an interesting question. How are organizations working on the content of their chatbots? Do these organizations have a dedicated AI team, or are other stakeholders responsible for adding content from their functional areas? I'm going to say both. Probably the chatbots, if they're being developed in-house, you know, with development kits or whatever, that probably belongs to IT, but gathering the content from other areas, the stakeholders themselves are probably responsible for that, and they need to deliver that knowledge to the team in order for it to be included in the chatbots. Mark, have you seen anything different from that?
I think that's spot on, Roy. I think your organization has the logic and the comprehension of your business better than any third party would, but they have the techniques of how a bot can be applied or deployed to leverage all that. So I find that some do it in-house, some bring in a partner, but what's important there is it never takes the place of your business processes and exactly what you're trying to achieve, and to stay true to that. Otherwise, it's these bots are going to complicate things without really solving the problem.
Yep, I agree. There's a lot of importance in AI, analytics, Internet of Things, automations, and its impact on service desk especially. What's your view on these areas where we have real product offerings and proven ROI? Also, please suggest vendors. Well, we're not going to do that. We're absolutely not going to suggest vendors. It's not what we do here at HDI. But the rest of the question, let's see. Real product offerings. Boy, excuse me. I'm having a little problem today. And proven ROI. Well, it's new. Some organizations have ROI. I can tell you that in one survey that we did, we asked a question about whether or not the technology ROI overall has gone up since the organization began investing in some of this advanced technology, and the answer was yes. And about 42% of the organizations that were investing, their overall technology investment was showing greater ROI. So it does pay off, and you can see the logic of that and some of the things that we were talking about earlier. Getting people away from the repetitive non-value-added tasks and letting them do things that are more productive and driving the organization as a whole forward, making more sales, producing more revenue, allowing people to get ahead of the curve as opposed to being reactive to it. So they're out there. This is a rapidly evolving field, but yes, there are cases of proven ROI, and there are lots of vendors out there. Go exploring for specifically what you need if you're looking for small pieces or big pieces. Mark, did you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's a convergence of these technologies that we shouldn't look at them in isolation, like analytics versus IoT. I think it's back to what I mentioned before. What's the use case? What's the business process? What is the ROI that you're looking to achieve? And if that is, say, efficiency, you can apply, any one of those and in combination. But I would always try to do it through the lens of the service, in your case, the service desk you're using or the infrastructure that you have versus sort of an a la carte approach to these different technologies coming together. I would start there because you asked about IT service desk and think about how do those technologies come to bear to affect this, and look to partner with someone that can bring all those into context. IoT may not play a role at all. You don't want someone selling you an IoT product that has no bearing on the use case. So that's kind of my advice.
Great, thanks. And agreed, yeah. Internet of Things is kind of a subject unto itself, and I think that we have, and we're prepared for it or preparing for it, but we haven't really seen a positive impact from that side of the fence yet. Here's a question: does introducing natural language processor add value in the service desk environment, or will it complicate? I think that depends on the particular application. It depends on how good the natural language processor is. You've seen commercials that have people screaming at the phone, "Representative, representative," and you've probably been there yourself where you say you say, "David Allen," and the thing repeats back, "Did you say rabid parent?" If the natural language processor is good, high quality, it certainly can help you. These are things that we use every day. Again, just that voice recognition on telephones, asking for specific people from a corporate directory, all that kind of thing. Speaking your question or giving a response when you call your credit card company, for example. Very often it will take your response from voice. It will let you speak your credit card number into the phone. That's all natural language processing. And it can simplify things. It can automate that front end, again, allowing the agents who sit behind it to have a quicker response because they're familiar with exactly what you're asking about, hopefully, if their software displays things properly to them. and they can resolve your issue more rapidly. So it depends on the specific application and on the specific product and how good it is. Mark?
I agree, Roy. I think it's early. I mean, as I mentioned, the voice recognition part of where Samanage is taking things, we see it having, great potential. And I think part of that is that we didn't talk about yet is someone's accent or their time zone, right? If we're trying to support people, in the Asia Pac region and we're a U.S.-based company, it's hard to staff people, through the night and early mornings. So I think it can play a role, and it will play a much bigger role in the future. But I think it's all about how good is the technology in simplifying it versus, to your question, complicating it. That's not what we want to do. The big potential.
Thanks. And I'll just mention that when I first ran across the name Ray Kurzweil, who is with Google now and a futurist, if you're familiar with any of his work, and really out there on the bleeding edge of it, he was working on voice recognition and testing it at Waltham General Hospital in Massachusetts back in the 1980s. So that's, how long it's taken for this to mature. And he was working with that specific accent problem, too, because the doctors there came from all over the world, many of them having accents from Asia, from Latin America, and he had to have this system that was built to take dictation of medical notes, respond to those accents, recognize the words, and produce them properly. So this has been going on for a very long time. Very interesting work. Another question, I've observed that AI and chatbots require a lot of resources behind the scenes to keep gears going. How long does it take typically for the AI to become more self-sustaining and move away from all the back-end support? That I don't have experience with. Mark, do you?
I do, yeah. I mean, I think let's separate AI from chatbots. When it comes to AI and machine learning, it's one of these things where you kind of place your bet and you wait for the rest of the cards to be dealt, and it plays out over time. So the more requests, the more interactions, it starts to, the machine learning aspect starts to show that it is working the way that you want it to, but it really is based on use. When it comes to chatbots, you're right. It can take a lot to stand it up and ultimately to maintain it. But that comes in the way of experience of don't bite off too much than you can chew at the beginning. So a chatbot that can do something like a password reset or direct you to some knowledge articles, that's good, right? That's sort of basic. But trying to introduce a chatbot to set up an intricate service definition, probably not the first one that you would want to do. But we have customers that are using these technologies to augment their service desk, and it's working quite well. But it's kind of that sliding scale of let's do the basics and then move to more advanced options.
Great, thank you. And lest I forget, thank you extremely for Samanage's sponsorship of this webinar. The sponsorships allow these webinars to come to you for free. And we're very happy that Samanage is sponsoring today. And thank you, Mark, for being with us. I would remind you that in the attachments tab, there's a link to Samanage. There's an infographic that we've just produced, and you can download that. You can also get the slides. And I will tell you that this webinar will be available on demand shortly after the completion of the live webinar. And it's usually a matter of minutes, and it will be available on demand. You can go back and listen to parts of it, hopefully not those parts where I had a frog in my throat. Apologies today. Just had a little congestion, and life goes on. We are looking forward to seeing you at our Customer Service Week webinar on October 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be a panel discussion with customer service folks and support folks who will be discussing the future of self-service. It should be a very interesting discussion, October 4th at 1 p.m. So it's a little bit off our normal third Tuesday of the month timeline. This webcast is copyright 2017 by United Business Media, LLC. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted, if that is the case, by HDI, which is solely responsible for its content and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and opinions. Thank you again for attending. Thank you to Sam Manage for sponsoring. We'll see you next time.